American business was once a reliable ally in the fight for limited government, but corporations today appear more interested in pushing the woke agenda than sometimes even turning a profit. On this special edition of Hold the Line, we take a look at how American business went woke and how Americans can start fighting back. Welcome to this special edition of Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Corporate America. We have this idea that corporations are just trying to make money, that capitalism is the driving force behind them, and that they're just trying to sell products and they're looking at the bottom line. That's what we grew up at least thinking. That's supposed to be the way the system functions. And sure, there are ethical considerations, and there are businesses that want to engage in practices that are part of the brand enhancement of being decent and fair to their employees and right to treating their customers right. But this is something entirely different. We're looking at the hyper-politicization of the American corporation. In fact, corporations used not only to support certain political ideology, but to suppress those on the other side, to actively attack anyone or anything that's supportive of conservatism, limited government, constitutionalism, you name it. You got to go woke, or else they'll try to make you go broke. And this is what we're seeing play out all across the nation. It's disheartening for many of us who just want to be able to buy sneakers or go pick up our favorite laundry detergent and not have to worry about getting something immediately in our inbox when we get home from the company we purchased from saying, here's our statement on the BLM movement, or here's our statement on transgender rights when it comes to high school athletics. No, I just wanted to buy fabric softener. I just wanted to get, a sweatshirt. I have no interest in your corporate political beliefs, but it has become now an expectation. There are multiple things happening all here at the same time. One of them is that you have companies that have gone from being afraid of boycotts to now actively being involved in calling for boycotts of others. You saw this with Major League Baseball in the state of Georgia, where they moved the All-Star game and over $100 million of revenue that it would have brought to another state because the left had decided that Georgia was, to borrow from Joe Biden, instituting Jim Crow 2.0, an appalling thing to say and a lie on top of all of that. But wokeness doesn't care about the truth. It ultimately cares about power, and woke corporations want to make sure they're on the right side of this at all times. Here's Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is doing his part as the governor of a very large U.S. state to try to push back against this madness and to call it out for how it is dividing us and how it's making America, quite honestly, just a worse place. Here's the governor.
If you are a Major League Baseball, you're saying you have to move out of Atlanta because they're having voter ID. Well, what about all the other jurisdictions that you're in that have, quote, more restrictive laws? What about the fact that you're doing business with the Communist Party of China? The fact that you've done business with the Castro regime in Cuba? It doesn't make sense. I think corporate America, by trying to genuflect to this wokeness, I think they've gone down a really bad road. They're going to tie themselves in knots trying to please the extreme left. What I've told people is, if the left is after you, the minute you buckle, you're just painting a bullseye on your back. They're going to keep coming back and back and back.
Never bend the knee to wokeness, not inside your corporation and certainly not to woke corporations. You have to stand and fight, stand up for your principles. You have to hold the line, my friends. And this is what we're seeing now, the recognition that if you want to be apolitical in your purchases, if you want to be apolitical with your choice of watching sports and all the rest of it, that choice has been taken out of your hands. You are in this fight in one way or another. The question that remains is, what do we do about it? How do we start to win? Because woke corporations have been pushing hard for Democrats, for Biden, for the left, and they've had an impact. It's time that we say this is no longer a one-way street. All right, up ahead, we've got a great lineup of guests to cover every aspect of the woke corporate culture. Coming up, we've got author Stephen Sukup about how political correctness and woke capitalism captured American business. Stay with us. Over 100 executives from major corporations recently met to discuss a unified effort to fight against new voting laws proposed in dozens of states around the country. On the call were executives from AMC Theaters, Walmart, major airlines, Levi's, LinkedIn, Starbucks, and Target. And that's just a handful of the people that actually joined. While corporate influence in politics is nothing new, the brazenly partisan nature of their latest efforts are problematic, especially for conservatives and especially with what looks like collusion going on here. American CEOs now appear more concerned with virtue signaling and placating social justice warriors than they do the bottom line. So just how did American business become the domain of the far left in this way? Well, let's go to the man who wrote a book about it. Joining me now is the author of The Dictatorship of Woke Capital, How Political Correctness Captured Big Business, Stephen Soukup. Stephen, great to have you on, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, American business used to be, if not conservative, certainly thought of as reliably right of center. You got lower taxes, less regulation, free markets. That was kind of the ethos we thought of when it came to corporate America. That all seems to have changed a lot. Was there a catalyst for the woke revolution in big business, or has this just been incrementalism from the left as they've now seized the commanding heights of corporate America?
If you're looking for a specific catalyst, you have to go back about 100 years. World War I was the catalyst. And when the Great War did not result in the Marxist revolution, the Marxists all sat down afterward and tried to figure out why that happened, why it was the workers of the world wouldn't unite, and the German workers fought the British workers, fought the French workers, etc. And what they decided was that the culture was too domineering and had too much control over the workers, and so they had to change the culture. And they began what the East German Marxist Rudi Dutschke later called the Long March for the Institutions.
We're currently seeing the danger that woke business poses to America, whether it's curbing speech on social media platforms or companies becoming involved in state politics like the MLB All-Star Game being pulled out of Georgia. Do you feel like we have reached a turning point here, and where do you see this going?
Well, we've definitely we're definitely on an upward trend. I don't know at what point we'll hit a peak for woke political activism on the part of corporate America, but we're definitely moving in the wrong direction, and we have been for a couple of years. I believe that they are very concerned about their businesses, about their jobs, and about the future of corporate America. They're just getting their inputs from the wrong sources. They are being scared by large asset managers, by activist investors to embrace political beliefs and embrace political opinions, most of which are antithetical to the beliefs of most Americans, not just most conservatives, but most Americans as well.
Now, Stephen, I also want to just ask you, is the dynamic in these corporations more that the C-suite, if you will, the CEO, the CFO, the people at the top, are they caving to the young, woke, lower-level employees at places like Amazon and Uber and Google, or is it that really the top echelon at places like Nike and Major League Baseball, are they as woke as the Gen Z folks who are coming in and really believe that Marxism is the way of the future at a company? It seems kind of nuts.
It is nuts, but the pressure on corporations to embrace woke political opinions generally comes from three places. It can come from the bottom up, which, as you say, is employees, Gen Z employees pressuring the company to adopt their political positions. It can come from the top down. There are some pretty woke CEOs out there. Tim Cook at Apple is probably the wokest CEO of them all, and a lot of the pressure comes from there. But then a lot of pressure comes from the outside in. And that's activist shareholders, that's activist asset managers who are pressuring companies as well. And over the past couple of years, I'd say the most damaging and significant pressure is from the outside in, and is specifically from asset managers.
And why is it that these companies aren't afraid, it seems, at all, I mean, it's speaking as somebody who's on the right and has been working in conservative media and politics now for a decade. I've never seen companies that seem like they're concerned about pretty openly spitting in the face of half the country by party affiliation. Well, how does that not factor into the thinking? Do they just not actually feel it ever in the bottom line?
Well, there are a couple of issues there. And the first is that the conservatives generally are not quite as good as the left at collective action. So conservative boycotts are not terribly productive. They don't usually work. But also in the realm of asset management and of corporate business, corporate shareholders, et cetera, the left has been extremely well organized and extremely well funded for probably 20 years. Whereas on the right, we've had one person, Justin Danhoff at the Free Enterprise Project, fighting back on our behalf. And so we're way, way behind and we're way underfunded.
What should happen now? Are there policy solutions in addition to the boycotts, especially when people are thinking about big tech? This is a really important, I think it's one of the most central conversations that could be had right now in American politics if you're a conservative. What do you think can be done here about woke corporations? What should be done?
Well, what can be done, what should be done, I think there are a number of different avenues to pursue. Most importantly, though, I think that conservatives in their day-to-day lives should make a concerted effort to engage with corporations that have taken a political position, whether that means complaining to customer service or complaining to investor relations if you happen to hold stock in the company, or organizing a group to buy significant shares of stock to sort of counteract the left's efforts to use shareholder power to leverage political beliefs. So there are a number of directions that people can go in their everyday lives. There are a number of directions that conservative organizations can go. And again, I think the most important thing is to engage with these corporations. As for policy, there certainly will be there certainly will be room for public policy options here. There is a significant problem with the way that proxy advisory services function in our capital markets. And I think that the regulatory regime can help alleviate some of those problems. But I think it would be most effective and certainly most in line with conservative beliefs if the primary pushback came from the people and leveraged our power as shareholders and consumers.
Stephen, appreciate your expertise and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Professional sports, once a daily escape for Americans, now embracing left-wing activism. We'll take a closer look at that with the author of Republicans Buy Sneakers Too and founder of Outkick.com, Clay Travis, next. Traditionally, the world of sports was a place Americans could go to escape. Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals. For a few hours, they could put aside their differences and cheer on their favorite team together. But like so many institutions in America, Major League Sports have now become saturated with woke politics. Here for more on the trend of wokeness in American sports is the founder of Outkick.com and author of Republicans Buy Sneakers Too, How the Left is Ruining Sports with Politics, Clay Travis. Clay, great to see you.
Hey, Buck. Appreciate you having me, man.
So can you just tell us, has the wokeness been something that you can attribute in sports specifically to one incident in recent years? Did it get a lot worse because of one thing, or has this just been a gradual thing? I mean, for example, was it Colin Kaepernick that brought about this whole new approach in professional leagues?
I think Kaepernick put it on steroids, but what I would attribute it to more than anything else is the rise of social media, Buck. I think what social media did was, instead of everybody trying to serve the largest possible audience, and I think this is true in a larger context in media, but I think certainly in the world of sport, when you weren't trying to serve a tiny niche of your audience, there was in sports an attempt to appeal to everyone. And it's why sports was so great, right? If you're in a stadium or you're in an arena, you turn and high five when your team wins, and you don't think about the race, gender, religion, ethnicity, or anything else that might be a dividing identity politics laden issue. And what sports, unfortunately, is having to grapple with is what our country is as well. It used to be that everybody's trying to speak to the largest possible audience. I think it was social media, but I also think Colin Kaepernick put things on steroids. And we talk a lot about the bias that I think is real and exists in the world of politics, for instance, Buck, right? Where there's a lot more liberal, left-leaning media members than there are conservative or middle of the road. It's even worse in the world of sports. I'm the only guy out there in the entire sports industry, which is crazy to think about, who was willing to say that he was voting for Donald Trump in the 2020 presidential election. Everybody else was voting for Joe Biden. And that's because we don't really have a marketplace of ideas. We have a one-side dominant in sports that doesn't get enough attention. The sports media is all far left-wing, not just left-wing, far left-wing.
It's one thing for players to wear their politics on their sleeves, but more and more what we're seeing is that the actual organizations themselves, Major League Baseball, recently that got a lot of attention, but the NFL and the NBA before that the leagues are injecting themselves in politics now. Is this just responding to the players, the advertisers, or are there people at the very top of these places you think are actually woke?
I don't think they're woke. I think they're trying to preserve their own job. And there are a lot of white guys in positions of power in pro sports, and they are terrified, in college sports too. They are terrified that the mob might one day shift and use them as a target as opposed to focusing on other things. So I think ultimately Rob Manfred made a disastrous decision, Buck, right? The Morning Consult came out with a poll that showed that Republican support for Major League Baseball had gone from 47 net favorability to 12 in the wake of the decision that was made in Atlanta. And look, you took an all-star game away from a majority black city that was going to interject $100 million in economic impact. They were going to be honoring Hank Aaron, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, that was directly affiliated with the Braves and recently died, the home run leader. And for many people, I know Barry Bonds, there's an argument about that, certainly with the steroids era. But in a larger context, I think it's about self-preservation. I think they are afraid that the mob will turn on them, and that if they aren't perceived as being woke enough, that their jobs are in danger, which means they're doing what might be the best for their own self-preservation, but they're actually costing the overall business that they run.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about, Clay. And we know that these are ultimately businesses with a bottom line. They're multi-billion-dollar businesses now. We look at these different franchises and different leagues. So what has the result been? Because for example, I think conservatives are a little complacent because after the Kaepernick situation, for example, there was this sense, oh, well, Nike is going to pay the price. And at least in the short term, I know people told me, I don't pay as much attention to sports as a lot of other folks, Nike stock actually went up. And it didn't result that they sold more to different constituencies across the country. And so they didn't suffer economic pain. What has been the actual outcome here when these leagues take, I know the Major League Baseball thing is probably too soon for us to see, but with the NBA and the NFL, all the kneeling, have their bottom lines suffered, or are they actually playing to their base enough that it's good business decisions for them?
Well, it's an excellent question. And I think in general, boycotts don't work because they're basically free advertising. We're in the media business. How often does a boycott work against the media figure as opposed to how much do their ratings increase? Because oftentimes, I always like to say, the only bad publicity, there's no such thing as bad publicity unless you're facing jail time. And so if people are just mad at you because of something that you said, it almost always in the end run ends up working in your benefit because it just creates overall more awareness for you, your show, your brand, everything else. And I think there's an element of that certainly associated with Nike. I think also we tend to get overwrought by things that are big stories in the world of social media, and we fail to recognize that 80% of Americans aren't, for instance, on Twitter in any way, and a tiny percentage even of those 20% that are on are active tweeters on a day-to-day basis. In other words, it's not necessarily representative of the largest universe, all of the conflicts that exist there. Having said that, the NFL lost 19% of its overall ratings in the wake of the Colin Kaepernick controversy. that is a substantial hit. The people who bore the brunt of those costs were the television networks, not the leagues, because the leagues and the players are somewhat inoculated because they tend to sign 10-year or longer television contracts. And so any kind of flare up in the short term, by the time we get to the end of these television deals in 10 years, well, inflation, the overall marketplace has likely risen to the point where they're going to get an increase in value regardless. So we haven't really seen it tangibly. Now, I do think Major League Baseball may have a major issue here because I think there are a lot of people who are going to watch less Major League Baseball over this All-Star game decision. And again, the people that would bear the brunt of those issues would be the league's television partners, not as much the leagues themselves.
What do you think should be the response? You mentioned your thoughts on boycotts just a moment ago. So do you think the better approach is to try to do, I guess, outreach and say, hey, guys, can we all just agree that we don't want sports to be woke because we want a place, dare I say, a safe space, right? But just something where people can come together. Is it outreach, or is it polarization and ossification? Essentially, all right, well, we're going to have to slap down places that do this and maybe start our own leagues? I mean, it seems crazy, but that's what's happening now on social media. What do you think the approach should be?
Well, I mean, if I were running a business, my goal in a 50-50 America would be to try to have as many people as possible consuming my product, right? To me, that's a no-brainer. And I think Michael Jordan had it right when he was asked why he wasn't super politically active, and he said Republicans buy sneakers too. And to me, the generation of sports that I most responded to favorably was led by guys like Michael Jordan, by Tiger Woods, by the universe that's trying to appeal to every single person, whether they're white, black, Asian, or Hispanic. Now, with the way that we have sort of created this social media universe where everybody has a different niche, it can be good business. Like, nobody's probably made more money talking about how awful America is than Colin Kaepernick in the history of sports, right? It can be good individual business for Kaepernick and bad for the overall NFL brand. So what I always say is all of these social media angers and flare-ups, they almost never last, Buck, longer than 24 hours, right? People are furious. They're angry for 24 hours. But if you can just come out and avoid having to accede and bow and genuflect at the altar of the woke universe, basically in 24, 48 hours, they're almost always gone and people move on to the next target. And I think that every brand, frankly, should be doing less, certainly if their goal is to appeal to everyone. Now, if you know that your brand is particularly right-leaning or particularly left-leaning, it can be great business, right? The My Pillow guy, I think leaning into that has probably helped him overall as a business. I think Ben & Jerry's has probably helped by being a woke ice cream company. But the Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, all of those leagues, the NHL, they're trying to appeal to everybody. Democrats, Republicans,
and they can't piss
else.
off.
I don't think
pissing off half the country is it's not a good move for them. And it's funny. I mean, I know the title of your book, guys, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. You should check it out, by Clay Travis. But I think I owned 3 pairs of Air Jordans growing up, and I'm a Republican. So there you go. Anyway, Clay, good to see you, man.
Everybody. He still sells, by the way. Michael Jordan still sells more sneakers than every current NBA player combined sells in any given year.
That's amazing. Clay Travis, everybody. Clay, thanks so much. Good to see you.
Appreciate it, Buck. Always enjoy it.
While Major League Baseball and the National Football League are bringing far-left activism to the sports arena, Disney and Time Warner are bringing it to the big screen. Actor and producer Kevin Sorbo joins us to discuss the film industry's woke agenda when we come back. For decades now, Hollywood has been one of the most effective propaganda arms of the American left, pushing a progressive message through film and television. More recently, though, the film industry, like so many corporate interests, has begun using its economic muscle to influence state policy. The most recent example is actor Will Smith and director Antoine Fuqua, who announced they would be pulling the production of their latest film from the Peach State for its passage of voter integrity laws. The pair released a joint statement that read in part, "The new Georgia laws are reminiscent of voting impediments that were passed at the end of Reconstruction to prevent many Americans from voting. Regrettably, we feel compelled to move our film production work from Georgia to another state." So with the far left so entrenched in Hollywood, how can Americans fight back? To answer that question, let's bring in a man who knows a thing or two about Hollywood, how it all works there, actor and producer, Kevin Sorbo. Kevin, great to see you.
Well, it's good to see you too. I know how to get blacklisted and banned from Hollywood. I'm pretty good at that.
Well, that ties right into this. So let's get into it. I mean, you know the culture in Hollywood, and it's obviously been very far left. You talked about it. You've been blacklisted there. Is it just irredeemable? I mean, do we kind of cordon it off and say we need to build our own Hollywood? Because that's what it feels like these days with social media companies. I mean, what are the steps that need to be taken?
Well, I'm doing that right now, Sorbo Family Film Studio. So people can go to Sorbo Family Film Studio, sign up. We'll get this information about things coming down the road. We got 2 movies that will be out soon in theaters. Got 4 more being shot. So we're staying busy on our own way. But I got to tell you, got to back up to Will Smith and all that. Is it that difficult to get an ID? I don't understand this. I saw somebody go into Harlem and it's floating out there somewhere and interviewed about 50 people. Every single one of these African Americans say, "Oh, I got an ID." So I don't get why this seems like such an infantile, such a childish issue. Why is it so hard to get an ID? I mean, I go to a gym to work out. When I'm visiting a town, they go, "Oh my gosh, this guy who played Hercules. We love you, Kevin Sorbo. Wow." I said, "Can I get a 2-day pass?" "Yeah." "Do you have an ID?" I'm like, oh, they know who I am, and yet I've got to get an ID to work out in a gym, a fitness center. Yet you don't have to have an ID to vote for the most powerful office in the world. I mean, come on, guys. This just seems so weird to me, and I'm sorry if I'm laughing about it, but it's ridiculous.
Well, Kevin, they moved the Major League All-Star game from Atlanta, punishing the state of Georgia, the city of Atlanta. Atlanta is a majority African-American city. A lot of small business owners, a lot of hourly employees at the stadium. It hurts them. They think it costs $100 million of revenue for the state. To move it to Colorado, where they actually have, in many ways, more restrictive voting laws, and certainly the moving of the production, I mean, from Georgia to whatever other state, it's likely that the Will Smith film will be in a place that actually has more restrictive laws. So are they? I mean, Will Smith is an international superstar. The guy's wealthier than anybody would ever need to be in 10 lifetimes. I know Antoine Fuqua is a pretty well-known director. Do they really feel the need to bend the knee to this stuff, or are they actually true believers in what the left thinks?
I think it's just, jumping on the bandwagon. It's just weird. This is always perpetuated by the mainstream media, as you know, and it's just crazy that they move to a state that's what? I don't know what they are, 15%, 20% African-American, even if they're that. And what you just said it right in the nail. And it's not, I heard it's $170 million. They changed it. They changed what the actual impact's going to be financially on moving out of Atlanta. So it makes me not want to follow Major League Baseball, not because of the players and the athletes in it, because of the bozos that are running that sports franchises, those corporations. It's insane.
And you may have seen that there was a senior senior Disney executive who said that she often sees fantastic scripts, very well written, great scripts, but they pass on them because they don't meet their new diversity requirements. What are those? Can we hear about what those actually are? Do we know?
I know this stuff goes on all the time, and it's just really sad. I look at it this way: I don't care what color a person is. If I'm a business owner, period, I want to hire the best people. I don't care what their religious backgrounds are, what their skin color is, what country they're from. I would want to hire the best people for the job. I mean, they do in sports, don't they? Is there diversity in the NBA? What's the percentage of blacks playing the NBA? Like 85%? Well, where's the diversity? I think we should have more, more people from Guam playing in there. Maybe some more people from the Philippines. I mean, the hypocrisy just goes on and on and on, and it's just crazy. Their arguments make zero sense to me whatsoever. And yet here we are. We let them get away with it and let them go on with it. And behind closed doors, they've got to admit that what they did in Georgia was just stupid and idiotic. But now they can't backtrack. They can't take it back. Otherwise, they admit to being wrong.
One way to fight back, obviously, is for conservatives to produce their own projects. I know you do that, and you're making independent films, and you've been successful at doing that. But just for everyone watching, I mean, I think that it's tough for them to understand how hard it is for independent filmmakers like yourself to get projects funded, get them off the ground, get buy-in, get people to to work on them in the film industry? I mean, what is it like to be marked with the stain of conservatism as you're trying to do these projects?
Well, the next movie I'm directing is called Left Behind. They've done two previously before. I'm directing it, I'm starring it, I'm taking over the role that Nicolas Cage was in the last one. It took us 9 years to raise $5 million. Now, $5 million is the catering budget on Pirates of the Caribbean, So the movies I do have love and hope and laughter and redemption and faith, and movies that are positive, not the negative things filled with so much anger and hate and violence. And yet they can do $300 million movies at a drop of a hat in Hollywood. So, it is the toughest thing for us to do is raise that little bit of money compared to what Hollywood movies cost to get them out there. And we need people to support these things, because the people that own theaters, they don't care what people see. They want to sell seats and they want to sell popcorn and sodas. So, we need people to get out there and support these movies that have a positive message instead of the negative one that's being fed to us day in and day out. And
to that end, do you think that people should, you mentioned, for example, how violent and terrible, I mean, I've just gone over this recently. I've been talking about this on my radio show, Kevin, where I sit with my girlfriend. It's a Friday night. It's pandemic, so we can't actually go and see human beings really, but so, okay, we're gonna watch a movie. Let's find something on Netflix. I'm just gonna tell you, the two things that I watched recently on Netflix, one was about a psycho babysitter who's sexy but crazy and tries to kill the whole family. And this was the number one thing on Netflix. I don't remember the title of it. And then the next thing was about a fish man who's trying to impregnate women to create this new fish species. The worst trash I've ever seen in my life. This is Netflix, and it's number one. How does this happen?
Well, who knows? I think it's a lot of things they put out there saying it's number one. Maybe it's just something they got to push. Because
yeah, they own the. You're totally right. By the way, they own the algorithm. I didn't even think about that. They just call it number one. Who cares?
Yeah, they say whatever they want. So I tell people they need to go, if they're going to go to Amazon, check out my movie, Let There Be Light. Wonderful family movie, Let There Be Light. Check out my movie in theaters right now, The Girl Who Believes in Miracles. Wonderful movie that's been out for 2 weeks already. Family movie. Check out my documentary, Before the Wrath, and also Against the Tide. Very educational documentaries that need to be checked out. And these movies at any age can see them, not just, 17 and above.
There you go. Kevin Sorbo, everybody. Kevin, thanks so much, man. Appreciate you joining, sharing your perspective. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me on. KevinSorbo.net.
There you go. Business leaders may have brought far-left politics into the boardrooms, but the indoctrination process started in America's schools. After the break, former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker details his plan to combat the woke menace at its source. Wokeness now pervades nearly every aspect of the American economy, from Wall Street to corporate boardrooms. But it's not enough to identify the issue. Conservatives need to go on offense. The best place to start? Education. Today's students are tomorrow's CEOs and hedge fund managers. And we know that college campuses around the country have become ground zero already for the recruitment and training of woke activists and woke elite. Conservative voices, meanwhile, are being increasingly drowned out and silenced. Thankfully, former governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker, he's got a plan for fighting back in America's education system. And the former governor joins us now. Scott, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me on. Good to be with you.
I want to get your plan for combating wokeness and cancel culture on college campuses. But before we do, we've been seeing a rise in the influence in corporate America on states across the country, most recently in Georgia, along woke political lines. As a former governor, how do you feel about this new corporate activism?
Well, I think it's bad, but it fits in. Overall, we see people aligned with big government, big unions, big business, and big tech. And they're all against the little guy, the hard-working men and women of this country and the small businesses that make this country flow. As conservatives, we got to put our trust with the people working every single day and not with the big corporations, businesses, unions, government, and everything else that really are trying to take our liberties away.
During your time as governor of Wisconsin, did you ever feel corporate pressure in any way, or did you feel efforts by corporations comparable to what we're seeing now, not only in Georgia, but recently there was a phone call with over 100 major corporation CEOs and senior officials of those companies talking about how to react to Georgia all across the country. Did you ever see anything like this?
Not at this level, although we were starting to feel it even a decade ago, where when we pushed back against the big government union bosses, the big government special interests, there were a lot of the corporate elite, even at that time, that didn't want to engage in the fight. They didn't want to engage in the battle. They were afraid of the impact it might have because of the protesters and the rioters back even at that time. It was more the mid-sized and smaller companies, the people who ran those small businesses that stood with me during those protests and even during the recall. The corporations for years have been hands-off, not wanting to get involved in any of this, and now they've gone from just being supposedly neutral to aggressively being with those who have the more radical point of view. I think that is dangerous, and I certainly think as consumers it's well within our right to push back and say, well, we don't need to buy the products you're selling if you are going to be outright against the things we're for.
What would your advice be to governors and state legislatures around the country as corporations increasingly try to influence policy and really direct policy, it seems?
Well, one of the best things I think we could do, and it's a lesson I learned not just of late, but even during my time as governor, the best way to influence economic prosperity in your state is get government out of the way. We were involved in a battle of tax incentives and credits even early on. I look back and think the better bet going forward would be just get rid of them all, level the playing field. I'd love to have a flat tax for every individual and every employer out there. Have a flat tax, don't give any benefits, don't give any special favors, and just say everybody competes at the same level. And if you want to compete in a given state or jurisdiction, make your taxes lower, make your state or your local city more appealing in terms of your employment base, but don't provide these incentives, because that's why increasingly some of the top executives in the country are listed as Democrats or liberals, because they're dependent on the government to give them a subsidy or a benefit or some sort of a tax break. Just level the playing field and let everybody compete.
You're currently the president of Young America's Foundation, which is arguably the most influential conservative youth organization in America. You've made it your mission to fight back against the cancel culture, which is one of the most potent weapons of the woke ideologues, in an effort called the long game. I mean, tell us about this long game effort, what Young America's Foundation is doing with it, and what the plan is here.
Yeah, if you want your free copy, yaf.org/longgame. I'll send you a free copy today. YF's been around for a while. They do fabulous work. It even goes back to William F. Buckley and Ronald Reagan before he was even in office. We're at over 2,000 campuses where we support conservative students today. But as I came in at the beginning of February, we looked at this and said, that's not enough. When you look at how radicalized students have been, not only on campus, but increasingly even in K through 12 education, when you see how we're under siege in our culture and increasingly even in our communications from the censorship from big tech, we've got to fight back in ways like we've never fought before. This all didn't happen overnight on the left. They've been at this for decades. You go all the way back to Saul Alinsky back in the 1960s. And so we needed to have a plan, a long game plan that was more than just a news cycle, more than just a presidential cycle. And for us, it's simple. It's 12 action points. I'll give you one or two examples, not all 12 of them, but we want to be on all 4,000 campuses, not just half of them. We want to reach 1 million more students in the programs we put on just through YF with speakers and conferences and events and gatherings. We want to go not just further into college, we want to go beyond even high school into junior high and create membership programs there where they can hear from great conservative speakers and influencers. And where needed, we're prepared to countermatch head-to-head with what the left's doing and provide support even for elementary school student parents. Because as you know, they're teaching our kids even that young to hate America with things like the 1619 Project. We want to give parents the tools to match that, to counter that, to talk about why America is exceptional, why our founding principles were so right, and why Judeo-Christian values are what this country is founded on and should be going forward.
What can be done when it comes to just getting more access for conservative speakers and conservative voices on campus? I mean, when you and your organization try to set up these speeches in the past, as we've seen, there have been efforts not only by Antifa and the woke left militants, but by administrators in some of these universities to shut down very mainstream and often erudite conservative voices. Are you finding that there are at least some people on campus that are in the administration that are usually open to reason? I mean, how does that process work?
No, we have to invoke the Constitution. Of course, we want to win in the court of public opinion, but increasingly we have to win in the court of law. And so part of our long game is to up our team here at YAF, as well as our partners like Alliance Defending Freedom, to aggressively go out, proactively seek out cases, not just for speakers, but for conservative students and organizers, and yeah, even educators. There aren't many, but there are some conservative professors and teachers, all of whom need to be supported. The Constitution guarantees free speech. It should be revered on our college campuses, yet it's the most at risk there. And so we'll take it right to them anywhere we're at. The best case example we have of late is UC Berkeley. They claim, like many administrators do, that they're for free speech, but they put up all these barriers to bringing conservative speakers in. We went to court. We took them to court. We won. They had to settle. And in the end, not only did they have to pay some of the legal fees involved with this whole process, most importantly, they had to reverse their policy that blocked conservative speakers from coming onto campus. If we can win at UC Berkeley, we can win anywhere in America. And we're going to take it everywhere in America to make sure conservative voices can be heard.
Former Governor Scott Walker. Sir, good to see you. Good luck with your mission. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
That's all the time we have for this special edition of Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Shields high.